I'm Dr. Marilyn Caff, and special education is my name. One, I have a learning disability in the area of math, which means that I can do basic math calculations, but when it comes to advanced problem solving, story problems, that sort of thing, I'm out to lunch. I do have another diagnosed disability that happened a little later in life. After the birth of my daughter 27 years ago, I was diagnosed with what is called degenerative myopia, which means that my eyeballs are, rather than being round like yours, they are egg-shaped. And as a result, they continue to grow. And it has happened that in one eye I had a retinal bleed, and the other eye I'm gradually losing my distance vision. And so with that, about a year ago, I was diagnosed as being legally blind, meaning that they cannot correct with contacts or surgery or glasses to any great degree.
Degenerative myopia is the seventh leading cause to legal blindness, occurring in about 2% of the U.S. population.
The biggest daily struggle for me is that I cannot see to do work on the computer as clearly as I used to be able to. It requires a workaround, and I am literally professor. I have something called a Pebble, which allows me, it is a CATV device that allows me to grocery shop. If I'm in a meeting and I need to read something, I can use it to magnify the print. I can see to print, to write a check. I can see to sign documents, that sort of thing. So what that has meant for me is that I can no longer drive, which is a pain in the butt, but anyway, and I have difficulty reading. So last summer I went to the Johns Hopkins Low Vision Clinic and got a number of devices that make it possible for me to continue with my work. As you know, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, if I have a diagnosed disability, then I am entitled to certain reasonable accommodations. And K-State was great. They gave me all of the accommodations that I asked for.
I think it's important to let people know where we came from, because if we don't remember it, we're going to repeat it, and we already are in places. Those kiddos that I worked with at the state hospital, they didn't go away. What went away is the support they had, because they're now in the third grade classroom and we kick them out of school because they do crazy stuff. Well, guess what? They have brown eyes too. They didn't have a choice on eye color, and sometimes they don't have a choice on those. So that's why I think it's important, because they're going to be in everybody's classroom, right, wrong, or indifferent. And they deserve a break today to steal somebody else's. That's probably copyrighted, so probably shouldn't have said that.
All right. Well,
that are what one of my mentors called, you have to be a table pounder to be successful in this field. You have to be able to sit in a table like this with people with suits that cost a lot more than what you can afford, and pound the table and say, no, it's not going to happen that way.
It's an incredibly satisfying job, but it's a really hard job. And over time, I started teaching special ed before there were IEPs, before there was a federal law. And just over that time, I started teaching in '73, the paperwork requirements have become impossible. And the kinds of kids who are in school now are difficult. And so for many teachers, particularly of low incidence students, they've become more managers of other adults than they are persons that are providing direct services to students, and that's too bad. But that's kind of the way it is.
So what do you see for the future of special ed, kind of right now, looking at it?
Oh, I'm actually pessimistic. The head person at the Department of Education at the federal level is not a person who thinks that services, she just was going to cut federal funding for Special Olympics. So that gives you an idea of where her head is as far as that. She's really a very, very rich person, and she purports private schools, charter schools, which tend not to accept our kids. So over time, then the public schools will be the repository of kids with disabilities because they won't be allowed into charter or private schools. So that'll put an additional burden on those private schools and those teachers and then funding as well.
I don't see good things. The only good thing I see is I still have faith in the choir, as I call them. And that's the 9 men and women that wear long black robes and sit in Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court justices. Because they've decided that it isn't just a good thing to do, it's the right thing. You know, there's always kind of power in the moms, if you will. You know, Park versus Penn was how our game got started, and it was just a coffee group of mothers that said, you know, this isn't right. And suing and winning, and then having it appealed. I mean, their kids were in the 30s before that hit the Supreme Court, but they continued that battle. And so that's my hope for the field is, you know, the battle's not over. You know, just because you put them in the 3rd grade instead of a special classroom or a special school, doesn't mean you've solved the problem. So yeah, the war's still on.
I don't like to be that way. I was going to say, when inclusion came in, I was not for that. I really liked my segregated classroom. I could do whatever I wanted. And I think that pendulum has gone too far. And I'm hoping that it comes back where we're making better personalized decisions on individual children as to where they would be best educationally and socially.
So, what do you think everyone should know about special education and about people with disabilities?
Well, first of all, they're not necessarily the same. You know, we choose to recognize 13 categories as special ed. Gifted is not one. You know, none of those people made that choice, and yet some of them we end up blaming the victims. So I think the takeaway for everybody is I think parents and I think kids do the best they can with what they're given.
Having a disability does not make you less of a person. I've had several people in the beginning kind of look down on me. I kind of felt sorry for myself, but as I thought through it, I've talked to the occupational therapist at Johns Hopkins, Trish Lindeman, and she is fantastic. She said, Marilyn, you have lost some sight. You haven't lost your ability to think and to do things.
They're not necessarily like you and I, but they're doing the best they can.
Biology is not destiny. That these individuals have limitations by definition, but that doesn't mean they can't have a satisfying and meaningful life, and don't underestimate what they can do.